Good morning, or good afternoon, or evening, or midnight. This is Mr. Woodward, here to give you a screencast of the overview of the position statement, assignment 4. It's kind of our main project for the semester. It's going to take us through the rest of the semester. It has various components. And so I want to give you an overview and explain the overview to you a little bit and flesh it out and elaborate on it. So the rhetorical situation is where I usually start. You know, what's the purpose, what's the topic, what's the audience, what's the situation for this piece of writing that we're going to produce? Well, a position statement is an argument, and it's a special kind of argument. It's one that's written on behalf of an organization. In other words, it's written to represent the organization and where they stand on some debatable issue that's relevant to that organization. So it's not like an argument, like a personal argument, personally here's where I stand on something. It's not along those lines, but it's more like here's where we as an organization stand on this controversy that relates to our organization. So for example, a national organization of parents of autistic children, for example, might have a position statement outlining where they stand on the whole controversy of vaccinations, whether vaccinations have some factor in causing autism or not. So the organization can lay it out. Here's where we stand, and here's where the members of our organization stand, and here's what we think is the best answer to that question about vaccinations. Of course, another organization might have a different opinion about vaccinations, and so their position statement would present a different viewpoint. So the audience of a position statement of this type is both primarily members of the organization. You know, the position statement kind of says, if you're a member of our organization, then you're subscribing to this opinion. We believe this is the right opinion, the most sensible opinion on the issue. So, you know, an organization of professionals such as psychiatrists or pediatricians, the organization is talking about life or death or health-related controversies, things that people may look at differently depending on who they are, but the organization subscribes to a certain viewpoint, and the position statement lays that out and describes for the pediatricians or for the psychiatrists that belong to the organization. It kind of reflects, the organization will support someone who also subscribes to that position. Their secondary audience is members of the public who, may be interested in where an autism organization stands on vaccinations. Maybe they are constructing their own argument for some other purpose, and they want to be able to say, my argument is supported by this organization as stated in their position statement. And so the topic is one single issue. For a position statement, it's one single issue, which means a debatable question, which means a question that people answer differently. The kind of question that you could have a debate about. Like the autism thing, although the evidence has been piling up that vaccinations don't play a role in autism, at least from a scientific viewpoint. That's kind of the way that has been going, but it's still a question that people answer differently. Some people subscribe to the viewpoint that vaccinations play a role, some subscribe to the viewpoint that it does not. So there's a debate. So the question is, in the form of a question with a question mark on it, the topic is, do vaccinations play a role in causing autism? It's debatable whether there's a right answer. Each side thinks they have the right answer. But there are defensible answers, more than one defensible answer. And so to illustrate this whole situation, I made one of my cartoons. I don't know if anyone cares, but it's meant to represent the situation. And so I found a picture of a couple of buffoons displaying the National Association of Buffoons position statement on horseplay. And so someone wrote it, a person wrote it, but it was adopted by the organization as representing their position on horseplay. And if you read their, the tiny little document, or the tiny little words on the big poster there, displaying, it's the beginning of an argument. It has a thesis statement. The second paragraph begins with stating a reason that supports the thesis, and then it gets cut off because it's a long document there. I don't know, scrolling through it or something. But it continues by starting to offer some evidence to back up that reason. As you're reading about argument, and as we talk about argument further, those are main components of an argument. A thesis, supported by reasons. The reasons are supported by evidence. And so we're doing the same kind of thing, although it's probably not about buffoonery. There's an example. This is a link, evaluation of teachers, an example of a position statement. And in the next few weeks, I think we'll be looking at other examples. But in any case, there's one to start with. The National Council of Teachers of English has a position statement on the evaluation of teachers. It's controversial in K through 12 education. How should local government and state government evaluate the teachers that it employs in public schools? The teachers have a point of view on that usually is different from the governor's point of view in the example of Louisiana, and there's controversy over whether to evaluate teachers and how to do it. And so NCTE has an opinion on that, and they state it in their position statement. It lets the members of the organization know where they stand. It lets the general public know where they stand. Organization, meaning how should this be organized? And so you'll be reading about arguments in Axelrod and Cooper's chapter, and you'll see how arguments are organized under a thesis statement and around various reasons that are supported by evidence. So you're writing essentially an essay. Length, this is the longest document of the semester, 3,000 words, not including your bibliography, in other words, your references page. The body of the essay itself, about 3,000 words. This is a research project, and so requiring that you use at least 5 periodical articles. These online resources are ways of finding periodical articles. EBSCO databases, and there are lots of similar tools to EBSCO databases that our library subscribes to, and that gives you access to them. And there are literally millions of periodical articles on those databases, and it's very easy to search if you know how, and so I'll offer some instruction on that, probably through a screencast. Google Scholar is a special Google search engine that pulls up not just any old thing that's online, but academic articles that are online. And so I'm going to ask you to find at least 5 periodical articles that have been published since the year 2000. You can use other kinds of sources. You can use more than 5 sources. They just need to be appropriate to academic research, especially considering this is a 4,000 level class. So Wikipedia, for example, is not appropriate. It can be something you look at, but it shouldn't be a source for the paper itself, something you would quote or anything like that. Documentation, we're going to use APA format, and I'm assuming you have some familiarity with that, but I'll give you a review of it and refer you to some online resources that help you put things into APA format, and you may know some yourself. The process is going to be obviously longer and more complex because it's a longer, more complex project and actually has a few components. But like I said, this is our biggest but last project, so we'll be working on various parts of it between now and mid-December. And so you're going to do a prospectus. I'm calling it a prospectus again because often for a position statement, the pre-writing is called a prospectus. It's sort of a proposal to write a position statement. You're also going to do an annotated bibliography, listing and describing your sources. You'll do an abstract summarizing the position statement. and we'll go through the drafting and peer review and revision and editing processes for all of these, although the process for the bibliography and abstract might be a more abbreviated versions. So the prospectus, I'll do a screencast on the prospectus, and again it gives me a tentative idea of what your plans are, and it gives you tentative plans and raw material. The chapter on writing position papers, that is the reading assignment by Axelrod and Cooper, is meant to give you a thorough review of argumentation. You have to keep in mind this is important, so that's why I highlighted it. Their chapter focuses on writing a position paper. Sort of primarily they focus on presenting your own opinion in an essay, which is not quite the same as writing a position statement on someone else's behalf. So for example, in a position paper as they describe it, it might be acceptable to use the first person to say, I think this and I believe that. It wouldn't make sense in a position paper on an organization's behalf to say, I think this, right? You might say, we think this, or the organization believes, things like that. And so the chapter gives you a basis, a review of argument and the components of it, but we're writing a special kind of argument that they don't quite get around to talking about. Annotated bibliography is going to be a preliminary assignment before you write or before you draft the position statement itself. It's going to be a list of sources that you intend to use, listed in APA format with a few sentences describing and evaluating those sources. We'll get into that. An abstract. Abstract means a summary of an article, and there are different kinds of abstracts serving different purposes. This abstract is kind of a summary of what you intend to write in your position statement. We'll go through drafting, and of course, it's always flexible and open to change what you're doing. In other words, after you turn in an annotated bibliography, you might decide not to use one of the sources that's listed on it. You might find additional sources that you do want to use. After you write the abstract, there might be things that you didn't mention in the abstract that you end up doing in the draft. That's the nature of the writing process. So we're not setting things in stone with the prospectus or with the annotated bibliography or with the abstract. And we'll do our usual focus on revision and editing. Now, assignment 4 has various components. Our main focus is on the position statement, and so it's worth 15% of your course grade. The project overall is worth 25% of your course grade. Annotated bibliography will be graded, and that'll be 5%, abstract 5%. So it's a big project that essentially is 3 bundled grades. Plagiarism risk assessment. For a research paper, there's special risks of plagiarism. We're dealing with outside sources. We're incorporating material from those sources into a piece of writing. That's the nature of the project. It's a research paper. We just have to we have to take care. Everyone's going to be using outside sources, and so everyone has to take care to use them properly. And if we follow APA format guidelines and we understand how to incorporate material without plagiarizing, and we know when to use quotation marks, it shouldn't be a problem. Of course, you could think of a topic on your own and think of an organization for which it would be relevant, and then you could eventually, at some point find or come across a position statement on that exact topic for a similar kind of organization. That's fine. You don't have to. It's not like off limits. It could show you some strategies that might be useful. You just can't borrow heavily from it, from a similar position statement. Obviously, you can't plagiarize from it in any manner. Okay, so this might have been a slightly long screencast because of a complicated project.